The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 8 months. David rolled over and hit the snooze button, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. Today was different, though. Today could change everything. He quietly got up, careful not to wake his 7-year-old daughter Lily, who was sleeping in the next room. The apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms, but it was home. The walls were thin, and he could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door getting ready for her early shift at the hospital. She had been so kind to them, especially after losing his wife 3 years ago. David walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. The stress lines around his eyes seemed deeper lately. Being unemployed for 8 months had taken its toll, but he couldn't give up. Not when Lily depended on him. He splashed cold water on his face and began his morning routine. The manufacturing plant where he had worked for 12 years had closed down suddenly. One day he was operating machinery, building parts for cars, and the next day there was a notice on the door saying the company was moving operations overseas. Just like that, 400 people lost their jobs. David had been one of the lucky ones initially, receiving a small severance package, but that money had run out months ago. He had applied to dozens of jobs: fast food restaurants, retail stores, security companies, warehouses. Some called back. Some didn't. The ones that did often paid minimum wage, which wasn't enough to cover rent and childcare. The good jobs, the ones that paid well, usually required college degrees or skills he didn't have. But today was different. Today he had an interview at Henderson and Associates, a big consulting company downtown. The position was for operations management, and somehow, miraculously, they had called him for an interview. When the HR woman called last week, David had to ask her to repeat herself twice. He couldn't believe it. The job paid almost twice what his old job had paid. It would mean Lily could stay in her current school instead of having to transfer to a less expensive district. It would mean he could finally take her to the movies again, maybe even plan a small birthday party for her 8th birthday next month. It would mean he could stop lying awake at night wondering how he would pay next month's rent. David put on his best shirt, the one he had worn to his wife's funeral. It was navy blue and still looked professional, even though it was a few years old. He had bought a new tie yesterday with the last $20 in his wallet. It was red with small blue dots, and the store clerk had said it made him look successful. He made breakfast quietly, just cereal and milk. There wasn't much else in the kitchen. Lily's school provided free lunch, which helped, and Mrs. Rodriguez often brought over extra food from her family dinners. People in their neighborhood looked out for each other that way. Lily woke up as he was getting ready to leave. She rubbed her eyes and walked to the kitchen in her pajamas. "Daddy, you look fancy," she said, climbing onto a chair. "I have an important meeting today, sweetheart. Is it about a job?" David nodded. Lily was smart, for her age. She understood more than most kids about their situation. Sometimes that made him proud, and sometimes it broke his heart. "Will you get it?" she asked, pouring cereal into her bowl. "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." Lily smiled at him. "You will, Daddy. You're the best daddy in the world." David kissed her forehead and grabbed his folder with copies of his resume. Mrs. Rodriguez had agreed to walk Lily to school, just like she had been doing for months. David didn't have a car anymore. He had sold it 4 months ago when the rent was due and he didn't have enough money. The used car dealer had given him $3,000, which seemed like a lot at the time, but it went fast. Now he relied on buses and walking. Today's interview was downtown, about a 40-minute bus ride away. He had planned his route carefully, leaving extra time in case the bus was late. He couldn't afford to be late for this interview. The bus was crowded with people going to work. David found a seat in the back and tried to calm his nerves. He had practiced answering interview questions in front of the bathroom mirror. He had researched the company online at the public library. He had even called his old supervisor from the plant, who had agreed to be a reference. As the bus moved through the city, David watched the neighborhoods change. His area was mostly small apartment buildings and older houses with corner stores and laundromats. As they got closer to downtown, the buildings got taller and fancier. There were coffee shops that charged $5 for a cup of coffee, restaurants with names he couldn't pronounce, and stores selling clothes that cost more than his monthly rent. This was where successful people worked. People with college degrees and nice cars and big houses in the suburbs. David had never imagined himself working in a place like this, but here he was, dressed in his best clothes, hoping to join their world. The interview was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. David got off the bus at 9:45, giving himself plenty of time to find the building and maybe even grab a coffee to calm his nerves. Not a $5 coffee, but maybe something from a convenience store. Henderson and Associates was located in a gleaming glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. David had never been inside a building this fancy. The lobby had marble floors and a waterfall that ran down one wall. Security guards in uniforms sat behind a curved desk that looked like it belonged in a space movie. David approached the desk nervously. "I have an interview at Henderson and Associates." The guard, a friendly, older man, smiled and asked for his ID. 32nd floor. Elevators are right over there." As David waited for the elevator, he noticed other people in the lobby. They all looked so confident, so successful. The men wore expensive suits and carried briefcases. The women wore high heels that clicked on the marble floors and carried purses that probably cost more than David made in a month back when he had a job. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like it took forever. David's palms were sweating, and he wiped them on his pants. He checked his watch. 10:15. Perfect timing. When the elevator doors opened, David stepped into a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Everything was white and silver, with modern art on the walls and fresh flowers on every surface. A young woman behind the reception desk looked up and smiled. "You must be here for the interview," she said. "Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." David sat in a leather chair that was more comfortable than his bed at home. He looked around at the other people waiting. They all had expensive briefcases and looked like they belonged here. David suddenly felt very out of place. But then he thought about Lily, probably in her math class right now, wearing the shoes that were getting too small because he couldn't afford new ones yet. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been covering their electric bill for the past 2 months without making a big deal about it. He thought about all the people counting on him to succeed today. David straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. He belonged here just as much as anyone else. He had 12 years of experience running operations. He had managed teams of people. He had solved problems and met deadlines and made things work when everyone said they couldn't be fixed. At exactly 10:30, a woman in a gray suit came out to greet him. "Ready for your interview?" David stood up, shook her hand firmly, and smiled. Absolutely. This was his chance. This was the moment that could change everything for him and Lily. As he followed the woman down a hallway lined with windows overlooking the city, David felt a surge of hope. Today was going to be a good day. He could feel it. David walked out of the Henderson and Associates building feeling like he was floating on air. The interview had gone better than he could have ever imagined. The hiring manager, Mr. Thompson, had actually smiled when David talked about his experience managing production teams. They had discussed the challenges of keeping operations running smoothly, and David had shared stories from his 12 years at the manufacturing plant. "We'll be in touch within a week," Mr. Thompson had said, shaking David's hand firmly. "I have to say, your practical experience is exactly what we're looking for. A week." David could hardly believe it. After 8 months of rejection letters and unreturned phone calls, someone was actually considering him for a real job. A good job. He decided to walk back toward the bus stop instead of taking the direct route. The weather was beautiful, and he wanted to enjoy this feeling for as long as possible. The sun was shining, and the city looked different somehow. More hopeful. More full of possibilities. As David walked down the busy sidewalk, he was already planning what he would tell Lily when he picked her up from school. Maybe they could celebrate with ice cream. Not the expensive kind from the fancy shop, but the good stuff from the corner store near their apartment. Lily loved strawberry ice cream, and it had been months since they had enjoyed a simple treat like that. The business district was bustling with people in suits hurrying to lunch meetings and important appointments. David felt like he belonged here now. Maybe soon he would be one of these people, carrying a briefcase and talking on a phone about important business matters. He was about 3 blocks from the bus stop when he saw her. An elderly woman was sitting on the sidewalk next to an overturned wheelchair. Her purse had spilled open, and papers and personal items were scattered across the concrete. She looked confused and a little scared. People were walking around her, some glancing down with concern, but everyone seemed to be in too much of a hurry to stop. David slowed his pace. The woman appeared to be Asian, probably in her late 60s or early 70s. She was well-dressed, wearing what looked like an expensive business suit, but her gray hair was messed up, and she had a small scrape on her hand. David looked at his watch. The next bus came in 20 minutes. He had plenty of time to catch it and still get home before Lily's school day ended. But something about the woman's expression made him stop completely. She reminded him of his own grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. Grandma Rose had been the strongest person he knew, but even she had needed help sometimes, especially near the end, when her arthritis made it hard for her to do simple things like open jars or reach high shelves. "Ma'am, are you okay?" David asked, approaching carefully. He didn't want to startle her. The woman looked up at him with relief in her eyes. "Oh, thank goodness. I was beginning to think everyone in this city was too busy to notice an old lady. In trouble." Her voice was strong and clear, with just a hint of an accent that David couldn't quite place. Despite her current situation, there was something dignified about her, something that suggested she wasn't used to needing help. "What happened?" David asked, kneeling down to her level. "I was trying to get over that broken curb there," she said, pointing to a section of sidewalk where the concrete had cracked and created an uneven surface. "I don't usually need this wheelchair, but I had hip surgery a few weeks ago, and my doctor insisted I use it for longer trips. I thought I could manage the curb myself, but the wheel caught and down I went." David looked at the wheelchair, which was lying on its side about 3 feet away. It was a nice one, the kind that hospitals used, all chrome and padded seats. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The woman moved her arms and legs carefully. "I think I twisted my ankle a bit when I fell, but nothing seems broken. I'm more embarrassed than anything else. I've been managing just fine on my own for years, and now this." David began gathering her scattered belongings. There were business cards, what looked like financial reports, a small leather notebook, reading glasses, and a gold pen that probably cost more than David's monthly grocery budget. Everything spoke of success and importance. "Don't be embarrassed," David said gently. "These things happen to everyone. Even young, healthy people trip and fall sometimes." As he collected her things, David noticed the business cards. They all had the same name: Helen Chen, chairman and founder, Chen Industries. David had heard of Chen Industries. It was one of the biggest technology companies in the city, maybe in the whole state. Their logo was on buildings all over downtown. "Mrs. Chen," David said, reading the name on the card. "You're the founder of Chen Industries?" Helen smiled, little embarrassed. "Guilty as charged, though I prefer to think of myself as just Helen when I'm sitting on a sidewalk like a helpless old lady." David couldn't believe it. He was talking to one of the most successful business people in the entire city. Chen Industries employed thousands of people and was always in the news for some new innovation or business deal. "Let me help you get back in your chair," David said. "Then we should probably get some ice for that ankle." "You're very kind, but I don't want to make you late for wherever you're going. You look like you have somewhere important to be." David glanced down at his interview clothes, then at his watch. He still had 15 minutes before the bus came, but helping Helen would probably take longer than that. The next bus after that wouldn't come for another hour, which would make him late picking up Lily from school. But looking at Helen, sitting there trying to maintain her dignity while clearly in pain and needing help, David knew there was really no choice at all. "I have time," he said. "The most important thing right now is making sure you're okay." Carefully, David helped Helen stand up. She winced when she put weight on her left ankle, but she could stand. Together they got the wheelchair upright, and David made sure it was stable before helping her sit down. "There," he said. "How does that feel?" "Much better, thank you." Helen arranged her skirt and tried to smooth down her hair. "I was supposed to be at a board meeting 10 minutes ago. My driver dropped me off early because I wanted to get some fresh air before going inside, and I thought a short walk would be good for me. Obviously, that was a mistake." "Where's your meeting?" David asked. "Chen Industries headquarters. It's just 2 blocks that way." Helen pointed down the street toward a tall glass building with the Chen Industries logo prominently displayed. David looked at his watch again. If he helped Helen to her meeting, he would definitely miss his bus. But he thought about his grandmother again and about how many times strangers had helped her when she needed it. How many times people had shown kindness to him and Lily over the past few years. Mrs. Rodriguez bringing them dinner when she knew they were struggling. The bus driver who sometimes let David ride for free when he was short on fare. The librarian who always found reasons to give Lily extra books to take home. The school nurse who made sure Lily had warm clothes during the winter. Kindness had carried them through the hardest times. How could he not pay it forward? "Let me walk you to your building," David said. "We should get some ice for that ankle, too." "Oh, you don't need to do that. I'm sure you have your own important business to attend to." David smiled. Nothing more important than helping someone who needs it. As they started walking slowly toward the Chen Industries building, Helen looked up at him curiously. "You know, in 40 years of business, I've learned that you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat strangers, especially strangers who can't do anything for them in return." David guided the wheelchair carefully around the broken curb that had caused Helen's fall. "My grandmother always said that how we treat people when no one's watching shows who we really are." Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She raised me after my parents died, taught me that being a good person matters more than being a successful person. Though I guess the ideal would be to be both. Helen nodded thoughtfully as they continued down the sidewalk. "And what do you do for work?" David hesitated. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to explain his whole situation to this successful businesswoman. "I'm between jobs right now," he said finally, "but I just had a promising interview." "Oh, what kind of work?" "Operations management. At a consulting firm called Henderson & Associates." Helen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Henderson & Associates? They're a good company. Very reputable." They had reached the entrance to the Chen Industries building. David could see through the glass doors into an impressive lobby with marble floors and modern art on the walls. Security guards in uniform stood at attention behind a sleek reception desk. "This is where I leave you," David said, making sure the wheelchair was positioned comfortably. "Wait," Helen said, reaching into her purse. "At least let me pay for your bus fare or a taxi. You've been so kind." David shook his head. "That's not necessary, Mrs. Chen. I'm just glad I could help." Helen studied his face for a long moment. "What's your name?" "David Wilson." "Well, David Wilson, thank you. More than you know." As David walked away from the building, he felt the same good feeling he had experienced after his interview. Maybe even better. He had done the right thing, even when it cost him something. Even when it meant he would be late and have to figure out a new plan for getting home. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Don't worry about Lily today. I'll pick her up and she can stay with us until you get home. Good luck with your interview." David smiled. Kindness really did come back around. David walked away from the Chen Industries building feeling a mix of emotions. Part of him felt good about helping Helen, but another part worried about missing the bus and the extra cost of getting home. He checked his wallet. Just enough for bus fare, but if he had to take a taxi, that would be a problem. He was about halfway to the bus stop when he heard someone calling his name. "David! David Wilson!" He turned around to see a security guard from the Chen Industries building jogging toward him. The man was slightly out of breath when he reached David. "Mrs. Chen asked me to find you," the guard said. "She wants to speak with you again. She said it's important." David was confused. Had he forgotten something? Maybe one of Helen's belongings had fallen out when he was helping her? "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "She's fine," the guard assured him. "She just asked me to bring you back if I could find you." David followed the guard back to the building, wondering what this could be about. Maybe Helen wanted to insist on paying for his bus fare after all. He hoped she wasn't going to make a big deal about what he had done. He hadn't helped her because he wanted anything in return. Inside the impressive lobby, the guard led David to a seating area with comfortable leather chairs. "Mrs. Chen will be down in just a moment," he said. David sat down and looked around the lobby. Everything was expensive and modern. There were flat-screen televisions showing the stock market and business news. Well-dressed people walked quickly across the marble floors, talking on phones and carrying important-looking documents. This was definitely not his world. After about 10 minutes, the elevator doors opened and Helen appeared. She had fixed her hair and looked much more composed than she had on the sidewalk. Walking beside her was a younger woman who looked like she could be Helen's daughter. She was probably in her 40s, wearing a sharp business suit and carrying herself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "David," Helen said, approaching with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming back. I hope you don't mind, but I wanted you to meet someone." The younger woman extended her hand. "I'm Jennifer Chen, CEO of Chen Industries. I'm also Helen's daughter." David shook her hand, still confused about why he was here. "Nice to meet you. Ms. Chen, please call me Jennifer. My mother told me what happened today, and what you did for her." Helen sat down in the chair across from David. "I hope you don't mind that I asked you to come back, but after you left, I realized I didn't properly thank you. And then I started thinking about our conversation." "You really don't need to thank me," David said. "Anyone would have done the same thing." Jennifer and Helen exchanged a look. "Actually," Jennifer said, "that's not true. My mother sits on several boards in this city. She's been coming to this business district for 40 years. In all that time, very few people have stopped to help when someone needed it. Most people are too busy, too focused on their own problems." Helen nodded. "And you stopped to help an old lady you didn't even know, even though you clearly had somewhere important to be. That says something about your character." David shifted, uncomfortably in his chair. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly," Helen said. "You did what felt right, even when it probably cost you something. You mentioned you had an interview today. How did it go?" "It went well, I think," David said. "At Henderson and Associates, they said they'd call within a week." Jennifer leaned forward slightly. "And what kind of position was it?" "Operations management, managing workflows, supervising teams, making sure everything runs smoothly. I did similar work at a manufacturing plant for 12 years before it closed down." Helen and Jennifer exchanged another look. This time, Jennifer smiled. "David, can I ask you something? What do you know about Chen Industries?" David thought for a moment. "I know you're one of the biggest technology companies in the city. You make software and computer systems for other businesses. Your building is hard to miss downtown." "That's right," Jennifer said. "We employ about 3,000 people locally and 20,000 worldwide. We've been growing rapidly, which is a good problem to have, but it's also created some challenges." Helen picked up the conversation. "One of our biggest challenges is operations. We have brilliant engineers and creative designers, but as we've grown, we've had trouble keeping everything organized and running efficiently. We've hired several operations managers over the past 2 years," Jennifer continued. "All of them had impressive resumes, MBA degrees from fancy schools, experience at big corporations. On paper, they looked perfect." "But?" David asked. "But they didn't work out," Helen said. "They knew the theory, but they didn't understand people. They made decisions based on spreadsheets instead of reality. They treated employees like numbers instead of human beings." Jennifer nodded. "The last one lasted 6 months. He increased efficiency by 15%, but employee satisfaction dropped so much that we started losing our best people. That's when we realized we were looking for the wrong things." David listened carefully, but he wasn't sure where this conversation was going. "We've been looking for someone who understands that successful operations isn't just about processes and procedures," Helen said. "It's about leadership. It's about making decisions that consider not just profit, but people. Someone who would stop their own important appointment to help a stranger," Jennifer added. Suddenly, David understood. "Are you offering me a job?" "We're asking if you'd be interested in hearing about one," Jennifer said. "The position is Director of Operations. It would involve overseeing our entire operational structure: manufacturing, logistics, human resources, coordination, facility management, everything that keeps the company running day to day." David's mind raced. This was much bigger than the Henderson and Associates position. "I have to be honest with you. I don't have experience in technology. I don't have an MBA. I worked in manufacturing, making car parts. And how many people did you supervise? Helen asked. About 60 on my shift. But there were 3 shifts, so the department had about 180 people total. And did you ever have to deal with equipment breakdowns, supply chain problems, scheduling conflicts? Jennifer asked. Every day, David said. That was pretty much the job. Something was always going wrong, and we had to figure out how to keep production moving. That's exactly what we need, Helen said. Someone who can solve problems in real time, who can keep people motivated when things get difficult, who can make good decisions under pressure. David looked back and forth between Helen and Jennifer. This felt surreal. A few hours ago, he had been hoping for a chance at the Henderson & Associates job. Now he was sitting in the lobby of one of the city's most successful companies, talking to the founder and CEO about a position he had never even imagined. I can see you're surprised, Jennifer said. This probably seems like it's happening very fast. It does, David admitted. This morning, I was just hoping to get one job, and now you might have a choice to make, Helen said. But before you make any decisions, would you like to learn more about what the position would involve? David nodded. He felt like he was dreaming, but if this was a dream, he didn't want to wake up. The salary would be $90,000 to start, Jennifer said, with full health insurance, retirement benefits, and 3 weeks of vacation. After a year, if things go well, we'd review for a raise. David tried not to show how shocked he was. $90,000 was more than twice what he had made at the plant. It was more than he had ever imagined making. There would also be some travel involved, Jennifer continued. Maybe once a month to our other facilities. Nothing too extensive, usually just day trips or overnight stays. We'd also want you to start as soon as possible, Helen said. Our current operations are being managed by 3 different people who are all overworked and understaffed. David thought about Lily, probably finishing up her math class right now. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been covering their bills without making him feel bad about it. He thought about all the nights he had lain awake worrying about money. Can I ask you something? David said. Why me? I mean, really, why me? You could hire someone with much better qualifications? Helen smiled. Because in 40 years of business, I've learned that technical skills can be taught. Character cannot. You can't teach someone to do the right thing when no one is watching. You can't teach someone to put human decency above personal convenience. We need someone who will treat our employees like people, not just resources, Jennifer added. Someone who will make decisions based on what's right, not just what's profitable. Besides, Helen said with a twinkle in her eye, if you can manage to keep a manufacturing plant running smoothly for 12 years, managing our operations should be a piece of cake. David laughed despite his nervousness. I'm not sure about that. So, Jennifer said, what do you think? Are you interested in learning more? David looked around the impressive lobby one more time, then back at Helen and Jennifer. 2 hours ago, helping an elderly woman had seemed like it might cost him his chance at a better life. Instead, it had led him to an opportunity beyond his wildest dreams. Yes, he said. I'm very interested. 3 days later, David sat in his small apartment kitchen, staring at 2 pieces of paper on the table. One was a job offer from Henderson & Associates. They had called the day before, offering him the operations management position at $65,000 a year. The other was the formal offer from Chen Industries, with all the details Jennifer had mentioned spelled out in official company letterhead. Lily was at school, and the apartment was quiet except for the sounds of traffic. Outside and Mrs. Rodriguez's television next door. David had been staring at these papers for an hour, still not quite believing this was real. The Henderson & Associates offer was good, really good. It was steady work with a respected company, and the salary would solve all their immediate problems. But the Chen Industries offer was life-changing. Not just for him, but for Lily too. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Jennifer Chen. David, I hope I'm not bothering you. I know we said to take your time deciding, but I wanted to check if you had any questions about the position. Actually, I do have one question, David said. Why are you being so patient? With me? Most companies would want an answer right away. Jennifer laughed. My mother taught me that the best decisions aren't rushed. Besides, if you're the kind of person who makes big decisions carefully, that just confirms we're making the right choice. After they hung up, David walked to his bedroom and pulled out a shoebox from under his bed. Inside were photos and papers from better times. Pictures of him and his wife Rachel at their wedding. Pictures of Lily as a baby. And at the bottom, a letter his grandmother had written him before she died. He unfolded the letter carefully. The paper was yellowed and soft from being handled so many times. In his grandmother's shaky handwriting, it said, David, remember that opportunities come in many forms. Sometimes they look like good luck, and sometimes they look like problems that need solving. The trick is being ready to recognize them and brave enough to take them when they come. Do what makes you proud to look at yourself in the mirror. Love, Grandma Rose. David smiled and folded the letter back up. He knew what his grandmother would tell him to do. 2 weeks later, David walked into the Chen Industries building as an employee for the first time. Jennifer had given him a week to wrap up his affairs and prepare for the new job. He had called Henderson and Associates and politely declined their offer, wishing them well in finding the right candidate. The first few days were overwhelming. David met with department heads, learned about computer systems he had never used, and tried to understand the complex operations of a technology company. Everything moved faster than it had at the manufacturing plant, and there were constant meetings about projects he didn't fully understand yet. But Helen had been right about one thing. Managing people was managing people, whether they were making car parts or writing computer code. The skills David had learned over 12 years of keeping production lines running smoothly translated better than he had expected. On his first Friday, David was reviewing staff schedules when Jennifer stopped by his office. He still couldn't believe he had an office with windows and everything. How's the first week going? She asked. It's a lot to learn, David admitted, but everyone's been very patient with me. Any problems so far? David hesitated. He had noticed some issues, but he wasn't sure if he should mention them so early in his tenure. It's okay, Jennifer said, reading his expression. That's why we hired you. We want your honest assessment. Well, David said slowly, I've noticed that the shipping department is working until 8 or 9 o'clock most nights, but the warehouse crew leaves at 5, and the customer service team seems to be dealing with a lot of complaints about delayed orders. Jennifer nodded. Those are exactly the kinds of problems our previous operations managers missed. They focused on the big picture but missed the details that actually affect people. I think if we adjusted the warehouse schedule and improved communication between departments, we could solve most of these issues, David said. But I wanted to understand the system better before suggesting changes. Make the changes, Jennifer said. That's what we hired you for. Over the next month, David implemented several small adjustments that had big impacts. He reorganized work schedules to better match workflow, improved communication between departments, and created a system for tracking and resolving customer complaints more quickly. More importantly, he spent time talking to employees at every level, from warehouse workers to senior engineers. He learned their names, understood their challenges, and listened to their suggestions for improvements. The results were immediate. Overtime costs decreased, customer satisfaction scores improved, and employee morale surveys showed the highest ratings in company history. But the real test came 2 months into David's tenure, when Chen Industries landed their biggest contract ever. A major corporation wanted them to develop and implement a new software system across their entire organization. The project would triple their usual workload for 6 months. Can we handle it? Jennifer asked during an emergency meeting with the senior staff. David looked at the project timeline and requirements. It would mean longer hours, careful coordination between multiple departments, and probably some creative problem solving. It reminded him of the time the manufacturing plant had to increase production by 50% to meet an unexpected surge in demand. We can do it, David said, but we'll need to bring in some temporary staff, adjust our workflows, and make sure we're taking care of our people so they don't burn out. What do you need? Jennifer asked. David outlined a plan that included hiring temporary workers, implementing flexible schedules, providing meal allowances for employees working long hours, and creating a bonus system for meeting project milestones. This will cost more upfront, David warned, but it will prevent expensive problems later, like employee turnover and missed deadlines. Jennifer approved the plan, and David spent the next week implementing it. He worked alongside employees in every department, staying late to help solve problems and making sure everyone understood their role in the project. 6 months later, Chen Industries delivered the project on time and under budget. The client was so impressed that they signed a long-term partnership agreement worth millions of dollars. At the company celebration party, Helen pulled David aside. "You know," she said, "when I was sitting on that sidewalk 6 months ago, I never imagined that falling down would turn out to be one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me." "How do you mean?" David asked. "Because it led me to you. And you've transformed this company. Not just the operations, but the culture. People are happier, more productive, more committed. That's not something you can teach in business school." David looked around the party. Employees from every department were mingling, laughing, celebrating their success together. Lily was there too, wearing her best dress and talking excitedly to Jennifer about her science project. Mrs. Rodriguez had come as David's guest, and she was deep in conversation with Helen about their shared love of gardening. "I have something for you," Helen said, pulling out a small wrapped package. Inside was a business card holder made of polished wood. Engraved on the front were the words, "Character is doing the right thing when no one is looking." "It's a quote from C.S. Lewis," Helen explained. "I had it made to remind you why we hired you, and why we're so grateful we did." David felt tears in his eyes. "Thank you for everything, for taking a chance on me." "You took a chance on us too," Helen said. "You could have taken the safe job. Instead, you trusted 2 strangers who offered you something that probably seemed too good to be true." Later that evening, after the party was over and everyone had gone home, David sat in his new apartment, a 2-bedroom place in a better neighborhood where Lily had her own room, and they could both sleep peacefully. He thought about the chain of events that had led him here. Missing a bus because he stopped to help a stranger. Learning that sometimes the right choice leads to unexpected rewards. Understanding that success isn't just about what you achieve, but how you treat people along the way. David pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Rodriguez. She answered on the second ring. "How was the party?" she asked. "It was wonderful," David said. "But I wanted to call and thank you again, for everything you did for us when we were struggling, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "That's what neighbors do," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "We take care of each other." "I know. And now it's my turn to take care of others." The next Monday, David announced a new employee assistance program at Chen Industries. It would provide emergency financial help, childcare support, and other resources for employees facing difficult times. "Everyone deserves to have someone in their corner when life gets tough," David told the staff. "This company succeeded because people took care of each other. Now we're going to make sure that spirit continues." As David looked around the conference room at the faces of his colleagues, he thought about his grandmother's letter. She had been right. Opportunities did come in many forms. Sometimes they looked like falling down on a sidewalk. Sometimes they looked like a choice between helping someone and catching a bus. The trick wasn't just recognizing them. It was being the kind of person who deserved them when they came.